to a cycle of a decision and an action is coming out. What is now is so important that you see 4 boxes. And if you buy a car, you go to a dealer. You enter the dealer, you're coming in, and the dealer is coming, oh, welcome. I have a very nice model, and it's especially for you, it's designed for you, you should buy that. And you're there because it's raining outside. Then you won't get a contract. What is happening is that the dealer is already there, and you were still thinking, why did I enter this dealer? There's a beautiful commercial on TV, and I don't know if it's in Brazil, but in the Netherlands, there's somebody going into a dealer and saying, he's at a Renault, and he's looking at that, and it's fantastic. And the salesman is coming in and is doing that. And the only thing the man says, I like it. I like to see it. He didn't want to buy a car. He only wants to see it. Be aware of that. That happens in discussions with your internal client. He calls you because he has to, but not getting your information. You are telling him what the possibilities are, and he still thinks, why do I call him? And if you are telling all the possibilities, all solutions you have for his problem, they don't get him because he's still there. A thing to remember. This is all a little bit soft, I agree, but it will be harder. That's this one. You have heard veel about the university, what was Harvard. We used Michigan State University. There's a procurement item in study. They thought about strategic processes, and they made questionnaires for all the 8 steps in this process, in the strategic process sheet. We use that to question all our internal clients and the procurement people to find out what is wrong and what can be done better and what is already good. It's very direct, and you get information out of it. You will be surprised because you don't know. You don't know what's going on if you don't ask them. That's for the strategic side. There's also one for the infrastructure, so the tools you have. There's also a list of questionnaires. And if you use that, you will find out the drivers from your internal client. That's the way how you find out the real drivers. And there's another nice one. And that's in fact, structure is a real roadmap. If you drive your way and you want to know where to go, you use a roadmap. Why not in procurement? Because it's commercial? No. Also, structure is an absolutely demand for have a good negotiation possibilities. This is the roadmap. It's from Navy. I must say, when I saw it for the first time, I was looking, what country is that? I tried everything all over the world, and I wasn't successful because it's a non-existing area on the world. But it's impossible to read, but I assume you get later on, you get a handout or something like that. And you look at the eco area, you look at the sea of change, you look at the sustainability islands, well, the town called benchmarking, supply chain responsibility, economic area. This roadmap is showing a lot of items which are important in the sustainability area. That's you need a day to get every information on it, but it's fantastic. It gives all the items which are important for the sustainability. But it's a roadmap showing you where to go. If we make a summary of this mindset, then it's clear that I've mentioned you some tools. I'm talking about the internal supply chain, external supply chain. And you need to professionalize procurement to make it possible to have innovations. Because if we go on as we did, we never achieve this improvements. If we combine that to the mission statement I've mentioned, then we have to focus on the money, on the time, in the project, but also in the personal line, quality and risk management. And risk management is a special thing. What is risk management? Risk management is there. It's a part of doing business. If you want no risk, do nothing. Stay in bed. The only risk is that you fall out. So you have to accept risks. The only thing is, if you have structure and you know where the risks are and you know the influence of the risks, you can say, we have to do this or we have to do that. And how do you find out where the risks are? Talk in the supply chain. Talk to your suppliers. Talk to your internal client. Ask them what they see as a risk. And that's a management that you have to handle. I'll come back later on with a sheet about that. So it means absolutely structure. And if you have structure based on the client's drivers, then you will be successful. That's the final sheet of the mindset. And I'm sure you have to recover a little bit. And so you have to think about this question. It's a company, a private-owned director. He has the best innovation idea. Say, well, I give a prize, 500 euros, for the colleague who has the best innovation idea for cost reduction, because he's the owner and cost reduction is very important for him. Knowing all this, what should be the answer? That's difficult, because you don't have the experience in changing in your mindset. In the Netherlands, and it's absolutely the Netherlands, I'm sure, they said the prize was awarded to the man who said, reduce the price to 100 euros. And that's not the innovation we are looking for. But it's a fact. This is mostly happening. And we want to change that. The price should be increased to 10,000 euros for the best ID, because that brings the money. We are halfway roughly, so you can be aware of that. I don't know if there are some golfers here. And I would like to explain what I mean with professionalizing. And because I'm a golf player myself, a real amateur, I must say, but the difference is, if you are an amateur golf player, you're on the tee box, and that's here, and the green is over there, and I can tell you, there is water. I must say, there's almost no water anymore because it's filled with golf balls. And the reason is that if you stay there and As a real amateur, you take the driver because you want to be ambitious and you want to show what your skills are, and you take the driver and you give him a hit. And the result is a slice. And if you don't know what a slice is, I can tell you that means that all the balls are there instead of there. And the reason it's only because we want to show how we can handle that driver. We don't look at the goal. No, we look at how do we behave here. A real professional golf player is looking at the green, then say, well, what do I have for distance to get the biggest chance that I come close to the pin? Where do I have to be here to manage that? And then he calculates back what I have to do there. That's a real professional. So starting from the goal where you want to be and calculate back, what do I have to do to achieve that? In golf, everybody accepts that. In procurement, say, well, that's ridiculous. But it's in procurement, it's exactly the same. Think what you have to achieve, think what your internal client wants, and calculate back what you have to do at the beginning to make it the highest possibility that you achieve that. We calculated back. And the extra sentence I didn't remember. If you calculate back, then you will realize that talking to internal clients, the pressure of the lowest price is forgotten when extra costs do occur. Also a thing you have to keep in mind. If you want to convince your internal client in the reasons to change, this is very important. Because he will ask you, I want to have the lowest price, but what he exactly means is, I want the lowest costs. And that means that sometimes you have to buy a little bit more expensive. No, this is not the wrong side up. In my opinion, the most important part in the procurement supply chain, internal supply chain, is project management. They are responsible. Project management is responsible for the result of the project, and not procurement, and not the management. It's the project management. And they decide, when we talk about supply chain, when do I need it, what do I need, and how much. That's their decision. And it's not procurement decision. The procurement team is supporting that. And that's the reason I draw it like this. So procurement team say, where do I buy it? And who does it? Who does it in the procurement organization? And the only thing procurement managers has to do is say how we are doing it. That means that this is the strategy for this. And the buyer has to take care that it's done according to this sheet. He is the manager of the procurement process. And of course, he has to negotiate about conditions, that's clear. But a very important part of his job is being the manager that this is happening. 3/4. See, you can trust in the supply chain if you make a good deal. Sorry, this is disappointing for you. I want to come on the item team player. If you have 11 kakas, it won't be a successful team. And of course, I can tell you also with one kaka you don't manage it, but that's not fair. the reason I'm telling you is that in this teamwork, you need specialists. In the supply chain, you need specialists. You need people who are successful in certain parts of the supply chain. And you have to accept that sometimes they are the big man, and sometimes another one. And there are people in the supply chain which you do not see, but do a very good job. That's same in the football team. You all have seen the final in South Africa, and that was the only match where the Dutch team didn't use this item. In the earlier matches, they all knew that they had specialists on certain items, but only in the final, everybody wanted to be the specialist, wanted to be the big guy. And that's, in my opinion, the only reason they were not successful. Don't make the same mistake in procurement. This strategy I just showed you as the bottom of this sheet is based on a few practical items. As I said before, you have to focus on the internal client, the project manager. The project manager is the important man. You have to focus on him. And you have to find out what his drivers are. Is that time? Is that risk management? Is that price? Is that a combination? Whatever. And find out what is important. Don't make your own ideas. Let's do him. Focus on the total cost of ownership. Focus on influences. If the total world is thinking about sustainability, you have to do that also. And sometimes it's more expensive, absolutely. But if the internal client asks for sustainability items, you have to do it. And this one was a very difficult one in my MTech experience. When I started talking about partnerships, they almost killed me. And the reason is that in the Netherlands, and I think in Europe, and perhaps also here, the idea was that a supplier is there to be killed. And not knowing that the supplier sometimes has a lot more experience and knowledge about your process than yourself. But the idea was we need price reduction, and I'm very happy to hear about Vale, what they are doing. That's the way you have to act with suppliers, because the knowledge is in the suppliers, and you have to get it, and you have to get it, and you can only get it if you have a partnership with them. Otherwise, they don't tell you. We had a strong support for our working method. I will show you that later on that sheet. An international cooperation within procurement. That was absolutely not done. Because everybody, not only over the countries, but also within the companies we bought. Because MTech is a company, they started, when I started there was 5,000 employees. And when I left, it was 25,000. And that was all bought companies. So every time again, a new one. And with new culture, with new ideas. And we were successful with our ideas to get this cooperation. You need a simple way of contract communication. If you don't communicate about your results, they won't be used. If you have a fantastic contract, but nobody knows, sorry, it doesn't work. Reduction of the risks in the supply chain, I just told you, and I will come back later on. And what we did was, a little bit strange, because normally procurement is there, you do the pencils, you do the paper, and perhaps the telephones, and we, project managers, will do the business. That's what we had to change. And that's the reason we said, we do not focus on the facilities, we do that later on. This is the working method. I go through it very quickly. The company X, whatever, procurement team. When we said it is interesting to have a contract with a certain supplier or a certain group of products, then we said we have one commodity manager, and there were buyers added from the business unit. So we don't have a central procurement organization. There was one procurement director, there was one secretary, and there was one handling all the ICT, and that was the only department on holding level, handling 2.1 billion euros. So we used all the forces out of the business units. Making a commodity team, they arranged the negotiations, terms and conditions came out. We said in the procurement team yes or no to the conditions, and it's going into a contract management system into the company. That's the normal supply chain of the procurement organization. The big advantage is that with the important suppliers, we had alliance teams. And in these alliance teams, there were people from the MTech organization, but also from suppliers, engineering, and sales. So a lot of information from the supplier came into the commodity teams. And knowing that these buyers are coming from the business units, close connected to the project managers, we got a lot of efficiency feedback. And that made it very easy to make new contracts later on based on efficiency proposals from our internal client. Of course, we have a procurement manual showing all the things we arranged, all the procedures, all the working methods, and so on. And the supplier was also very important. This is the basic of getting trust from your internal client. What are some possibilities? Of course, it's not absolutely true for you. It can change something. You have your own circumstances. You have your own company. But in our point of view, it was very important that also with our suppliers and our internal clients, we were not talking about prices anymore. We were talking about costs. And that made a lot of difference because the supplier, as Vale does, accepted their position and we accepted their position. If you reduce the possibilities of a supplier, he cannot help you anymore. So you have to support him. And that's meant here. Partnerships, and then the biggest issue in sourcing. Do you need single sourcing or do you need multi-sourcing? In our opinion, in my opinion, single sourcing is the best. And I want to let it know very, very deeply because it's in a procurement way of thinking, it's a little bit strange. But the only reason for a supplier to give you information which helps you in the deepest part of your organization is when he is the only one. The only thing you have to do is, in the beginning, you have to negotiate which supplier it should be. That's the biggest issue. So, single sourcing, in my opinion, is the best way. But not saying, okay, we need a supplier, okay, we take that one, and that's the one. Of course, you have to start with negotiations, with hard negotiations, but if you have decided, then you should stay to that. You can have discussions about sustainability. You will face that problem in near future, I can assure you. You are so fast growing that it's almost impossible that this is going without the sustainability discussion. The problem sharing with your suppliers, it was mentioned in the Valid discussion already. We did a supplier day. We invited all the suppliers and telling them our problems. And they could add their ideas to that. And supplier financing is already mentioned. So we were constantly searching for a group of suppliers and who can support us in reducing our total cost. And important, of course, that the price only doesn't determine the total cost. A lot of diversions. I do not have to explain them because you will know them. You hear them every day. Increasing price pressure in the market, being stock market listed. You cannot do everything you like. Differences in the rules. The sector of industry is very conservative. Difficult to make the step from price to cost approach. Language is a very difficult problem. In a European company like Imtech, working from for distances, you don't argue about that. But Imtech is an organization from the northern part of Europe into the south part. That's, we said, 3,000 kilometers or something like that. But changing over from 5 or 6 different languages. And if you're coming to a colleague in Sweden and he doesn't speak English, you can sit and wait, but nothing happens. The first one are more in the operational side, and the right ones are more in the procurement area. There's no strategy.